Hello, geeks. Welcome back to another episode of Geek Bros Talk. And this week, every week we change our names up. Not suspicious at all. We're not trying to dodge any authorities or anything. Anyways, so for this week, I'm going to be Billy Lee, and my brother's going to be Jimmy Lee. And if you didn't know, those are the two brothers from Double Dragon. Side-scrolling beat-em-up game, came out way in the 80s. Still kind of relevant today. But yeah, if you're into video games, you should probably already know that one. And, he's Jimmy because he's wearing red.
That's right.
So I guess I got some blue in my background. That might, be enough for me to be Billy Lee.
I like beating up women with whips. So
yeah.
And if you play Double Dragon, you'll get that.
Yeah, I was going to say, she didn't have the context. If you just tuned in to that specific part, you might think too he's kind of a misogynist. But anyways, moving on. Actually, let us know what kind of brothers that you'd like us to be next week. We have some suggestions. That'd be pretty cool. We'd be down for that. Anyways, this week we're going to be talking about the Google Pixel release. It came out a couple days ago, but I think the 3rd or something like that, right?
Yeah, they announced it on the 4th, and it'll be released end of October.
Yeah. Cool. So we'll definitely talk about that because our last episode, if you'd watched that, we had a lot of anticipation for it. We did a pretty in-depth discussion, and then now that the specs are revealed, we can finally, I guess, give our thoughts on it now, and if it really did live up to the hype or the expectation that we were expecting. After that, we're gonna dive a little bit into Amazon incentivized reviews. If you didn't know, those are reviews on Amazon where basically the vendor reaches out. They give you a free product, and in exchange, you give them a review. For the most part, all these reviews are 5 stars because this person just got a free product. Of course, you give it 5 stars. Mm-hmm. But they recently banned that, so we can really discuss about what that means for the end consumer, like you and me. If you're a savvy shopper, if you do a lot of shopping, like I think most everyone does on the internet nowadays, it may affect you. Whether you know it or not. Next, we're going to be talking a little bit more about VR. That's going to be specifically, I guess we're going to specifically start out with the PS4 VR. I guess there's been some reviews on it. I don't think it's quite out yet, but there's some early reviews on it. Reviews, previews, So we're going to see how that pairs up to, the two big contenders that are out right now, being the Oculus and HTC Vive. And so if we have time, we're going to be discussing a little bit more about web development, what it's like in the modern day and age, kind of my thoughts on it, my brother's thoughts on it, because he's kind of seen the advent of the internet, being like super old. He's kind of seen it from when it was first conceived to now. So we want to get his perspective on it, and then I could provide some input on I guess me really being the forefront and being like the new generation of creating stuff on the web. All right, so if that interests you, then let's get into it. So the first thing we'll be talking about is the Google Pixel release, or maybe not even the release, but the at least announcement and status. Specs all came out. So, why don't you go ahead and tell me what you know about the Pixel C?
Yeah, so let's just quickly go over what they offered and like some of the general specs. And so Google released 2 different phones. They are effectively getting rid of their Google Nexus program. So one of the phones is the Pixel Regular, that's a 5-inch phone. The second one is the Pixel XL, which is a 5.5-inch phone. It's actually more like a plus size model, okay, or phablet class.
Yes.
And the specs on them are like, both of them have a Snapdragon 821 processor, which is the latest processor. It does have 4 gigs of RAM. Both of them default has 32 gigs of storage. They both have a 12 megapixel, I think it's a 12.3 megapixel rear camera. And I think it had an 8 megapixel front. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And in terms of the screen resolutions, the 5-inch, the regular one, has a 1080p screen, and then the XL has a 2K screen. QHD screen.
So yeah, let's talk about the screen real quick. 1080. That's a bit disappointing, at least for me, because I think with the S6, which came out like a year and a half ago, even now it's like a 2K resolution, right? Like a 2500 by whatever. So what is your
I was actually disappointed as well. And we talked about this on the last episode, and I talked about this many times before, is that Google, they've always wanted to be where Apple is, and so their whole point of making Android, my opinion, was to get to that point. But they would be more than what Apple is because they have so many other services. So they would really be using that to sell all their other
Kind of
services.
like meld the hardware and the software, bring it together,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so they would be in every single category. And even when Google first announced an Android phone back in 2005, a lot of people were calling it the Google phone. So that's kind of what they thought was going to happen. So now they're coming up to that. And the reason why, if you look at it, the way it's designed, it's actually made by HTC, by the way. However, it is all designed, everything by Google. And if you look at it, and it's not by any surprise, it looks like an iPhone. If you look at the front, it really looks like an iPhone. Now the back, it is kind of unique in that sense that it does have a fingerprint scanner in the back, and it does have some glass in the back as well. And then also the edges, they're chamfered edges, which is known, that's a known design quality that HTC has. And I think more than anything, they're mimicking Apple. I mean, Apple, they still have a 1080p screen, even on their larger iPhone Plus, but they're Apple, so they can afford to do that. If you actually look at how the Google Pixels are built, they're built more like iPhones. They're very similar design. They have a very vertical way that they developed everything. So everywhere from the hardware all the way down to the software stack. And in terms of features, you compare it to other flagship Android phones. Let's take the Samsung Galaxy S7. I want to talk about this before I even get into this.
Sure.
The pricing for the two phones.
Yes.
The base model starts at $649. The XL version is $749.
Not only that, the only carrier it's going to be offered in the US is through Verizon, I believe.
Yes.
So, as far as getting it at a subsidized price, you probably can do it through Verizon, but any other carrier, you're kind of, out of luck there.
Yeah, and they are basically going right after the iPhone market. I really think that's who they're going after, because if you look at it, it's pretty much the same in terms of what they're offering and in terms of what they're not offering. That's really what I want to get to, because at $650, okay, you can compare it to an Apple iPhone, but if you are an Android user, for that same price, you could get a Samsung Galaxy S7, okay? So for the S7, not only do you get a higher resolution screen, a QHD screen, you're also getting a micro SD card slot, which I always say is very important. And so far, none of the Nexus lines, and now even with the Pixel, they don't have it. That's huge for me, okay, having a micro SD card slot. Another thing that the Galaxy S7 has is that it actually has waterproofing, dust proofing. It has wireless charging, which the Pixel phone doesn't, okay? And it's even the design. I still think the Galaxy S7, and especially S7 Edge, has a very unique and beautiful look. It's still a premium quality phone even right now. And so just those features alone that I just mentioned, if you're a consumer and you're going into the store, you're going to see flagship-wise, most people are definitely familiar with the Apple iPhone brand, and they're definitely familiar with the Samsung Galaxy S7 brand. So they see all these similarly priced phones. I do not think that most people are going to pick up the Google Pixel. I don't think that they are.
Yeah. It's kind of very interesting to see if anyone has like a whole horizontal slice of like the phone market. You would think it'd be Google themselves, right? Because
that's right.
But I mean, why they chose to kind of go, I would consider middle of the road, right? They're not, surpassing anything, but they're not, slouching. So why did they choose to release a phone that's kind of like maybe what you would consider mediocre, right?
Yeah, average, I would say. I mean, besides the Snapdragon 821 processor, there's nothing that stands out. And they do have more sensors for their Daydream VR feature. But that's not a must-have feature.
Yeah.
I just really... Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, who's this going to win over? Because, like, the more hardcore and informed Android people, we think it's average. The average consumer, they're like, oh, iPhone S7. I mean, who's this going to draw in? Like, I feel like this doesn't really try to hit anyone's, like, notes.
Well, I really think that Google thought that it was a good time now to do it, because their whole Google Nexus line, it was always a proof of concept, right? It was always like testing what would happen. They didn't really care how many sales that they made. Okay, but I think now, especially with the number of Android devices out there, there's just so many people associate Android with Google. They understand that. And so I think it's to the point now. And also, if you look at the versions of Android, it's more cohesive now in terms of design. The performance have gotten a lot better. And so I think for them, it makes sense for them to try this now, and knowing that they won't sell as many as they would like, but they're still going to sell more than the Nexus line. That's for sure, because it's going to have more mass market appeal because it's so similar to the iPhone. Okay, so I think they're targeting Apple iPhone users, I think, more than anybody else.
Right.
However, it's going to take, to me, it probably won't be till version 2 or maybe version 3 before more people are aware of the brand and then start buying it. You know?
Yeah, like I think one of the biggest barriers of entry to me, it's like, you know, you go into your local carrier store, right, and then you can see all the phones on display. That's how I would assume maybe most of the average consumer obtains their phone. But with this being locked to only Verizon, how are people going to find out about this?
Well, Google has a lot of money, so they are going to be marketing it. But I think the biggest problem isn't the fact that it's only on one carrier at this point. The biggest problem is the price. You know,
right.
If
well,
you
I mean,
remember
I guess being on a carrier, I mean, it kind of like hand in hand, right? Because if you can't get a subsidized price, then people, you know.
Yeah, and also they're going to be releasing it internationally. Let's not forget the international market is huge.
Oh,
so,
does it not have? It doesn't have dual SIM capability as well, right?
Well, not the one on Verizon, but I'm pretty
Okay.
sure whenever they release it on the Google Play Store, you know, it'll be unlocked. It'll have international features. Okay, but I think it's the price. The price is what's killing it. I don't think it's the lack of the feature, because Nexus they've never had micro SD card slots. They've never had replaceable batteries. So people are used to that. But before, whenever you bought a Google Nexus phone, especially the previous, the Google Nexus 5, you get it for about $300, you know? That was an amazing value. You wouldn't get like the top tier specs, but they weren't like,
It wasn't a slouch. Yeah.
No, it wasn't a slouch.
Yeah.
And you got the latest version of Android. Now, if they had priced it around, I would say $400, I think that would be an amazing deal. But when you price it at the same flagship levels as the top Apple iPhone and the top Android phone, in my opinion, I don't think you're going to win. I mean, I just don't.
Yeah.
You know, I think if Google were smart, my opinion, I think the best thing would be to have all the features of a Samsung Galaxy S phone and then get all the Android updates. And they tried that before. They tried that, I forgot, a while back with their Google Play phones, you know, where it would be the same phone that you would get like a Samsung Galaxy S6. However, it would get, they have the stock Android and would get quick updates. I don't know why that failed. I think it was the pricing, I think, so.
Yeah. So, you know, let's talk about, you know, I guess pricing history. Like historically, I feel like Nexus phones did drop in price pretty shortly after they were released. I mean, a lot of people are already anticipating this to drop a couple hundred, you know, within the next few months. I mean, do you think that's going to happen, especially with what we think is going to be a rough road to adoption rates?
I don't think so. The reason I say that is because Google, their Pixel phones, they want to be a brand like an iPhone. So how iPhone sells what they do, I've said this before in other episodes, they are masters in marketing. And so one of the perceptions of an Apple iPhone is quality.
Sure.
And one of the indicators when it comes to marketing and sales is people perceive a higher price going with quality. And so that's why I think that's one of the reasons why Google Pixel is priced so high, because people automatically equate high price with high quality. And so I don't think they're going to go down in price. They're not going for a discount or even mid-range. So I don't,
because they don't want to set that precedent, right? Maybe even going forward. Yeah.
Because they're trying to build a brand similar to Apple, and Apple quality is one of the first things that people think about when they think of that brand.
Yeah.
I mean, whether or not it's true, you know, that's.
I mean, I would definitely say it's true
buyer.
Because resale values on Apple, you know, I would give them that, right? They do always have high resale value because people still, you know, value very high when it's.
And I don't really think the quality is what sets it. I think it's the branding and marketing. Of course, you know, people are accustomed to those things when they think about the Apple brand. And Google doesn't have that right now. I mean, if you say Google, they automatically think of search, you know. So
True.
still, or YouTube. So
Do you ever think that Google would make it harder for other vendors to maybe use the Android platform later down the line? Do you think they ever come to a time and place where they'll lock it down?
Yep, I think, and I think manufacturers, they knew that. They knew that even when Android first came out. If you remember, Samsung, they released their own OS. It was Tizen.
Yeah.
You know, it was its own
HTML5
software.
base, something crazy like that. Yeah, yeah.
And you remember WebOS. You remember Sailfish OS, and then BlackBerry.
Was WebOS the previously Palm, right? Is that the one
Yes.
HP bought?
Yes.
Ah, good old HP.
Yes, and WebOS is actually still used, but it's used on LG TVs as their smart TV operating system.
Very interesting why they would choose pretty much a non-existent OS at this point.
Well, I mean, from the reviews, I mean, to get on different tangents, from the reviews I saw on the LG flagship TVs with the WebOS, it was extremely fast, very clean interface, you know. However, obviously nobody uses it. So.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if it's just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe it's too ahead of its time.
Yeah, I thought it was a really, really nice OS in my opinion.
All right. Anyway, I guess back to Google potentially, shafting these manufacturers in the future.
Yeah, and they're already kind of doing that anyway, because they're trying to control the design language. And so if you notice, there's less and less forks of Android. More people are trying to get closer to the stock. And also, if you wanted to become a Google certified vendor, meaning your phone offers all the Google services, you have to agree. There's certain things that you have to agree to, including the what software you offer on your phone and some of the design elements, I'm pretty sure. And I think that's where they're heading. They're going to lock it down. They're going to knock out their competitors, in my opinion. So I'm not sure what other alternatives there are. They have a monopoly, if you think about it.
Yeah. I guess they've been trying to step in the hardware market for quite some time now, and so maybe this is another step in that direction.
Yep, I think it's the right time.
Yeah, maybe it's kind of like open source it at the very beginning, get all the help from the community, piggyback off that, and then eventually, when you're able to use all those resources, and you can kind of slowly, make it your own, right? Close them out.
I mean, as a matter of fact, the most popular selling hardware for Google, and most probably people don't think about it, is actually the Chromecast.
Yeah, no, that would have been my first bet, actually.
Yep, that's the most popular selling hardware,
And they recently announced the Chromecast 4K, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the Ultra, the Chromecast Ultra 4K. Yeah, So my thoughts on the Google Pixel phone. I don't like the price. I'm disappointed by the lack of some of the features, and I was really hoping, and there were rumors that they were going to add micro SD card slot expansion, and that makes perfect sense. We do everything. We're recording 4K videos now. It doesn't take long for you to fill up 32 gigs. And they do offer unlimited storage, but come on, I mean, even if you had a great internet connection, I'm not going to rely on online cloud storage to store my things. And what if you have 4K content? They said unlimited for 4K too. That would take you forever. It takes me forever to upload even 1080p right now. So
Google Fiber.
Yeah.
Just wait till that comes out. Then they'll give you a reason to use all that.
That's right. That's right. So yeah.
I mean, at this point, we're pretty much just giving Google our information anyways, right? So
that's right.
There's nothing that they don't know about us.
So we'll see what happens whenever they release it here in the U.S. market. I'll be surprised if it sells a lot. That's my opinion. I don't think it's gonna tank, but
yeah. So can you find one of those emojis in our new video chat program that would summarize your thoughts on this Pixel phone?
Let me see. Yeah, I think this would be
check out his video. Ooh.
Yeah.
Is it that bad?
So that's what I think about. Why are you doing that?
Yeah. I mean, we know why. I guess we can know why, but
yeah, we know why.
We just don't agree with it, possibly.
Yes, I don't agree with that. I mean, like I said, I think the number one problem is the price.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess it isn't released yet, or quite yet, but I guess
I think end of October. Yeah.
We'll see when it does come out, and then we can probably check back up on it a little bit. But I guess for now, we're just not expecting too much from it.
Yeah.
So, if you were to recommend them like a next phone to be looking forward to, what would you say right now?
You know what? Honestly, I can't really say. I'm not too excited by a lot of the phones coming
Mm-hmm.
out. If I did have to anticipate something, honestly, the Galaxy S8. I've never. Here's what I think about Samsung Galaxy phones.
Mm-hmm.
I think hardware-wise, I think they're top tier. They
Yes.
offer you more features. Their design's amazing. And the only thing that really bugs me is their software. I don't like TouchWiz, and I know you could put a different launcher on there, but it's not only just that. They lock a lot of things. They lock their bootloaders.
Yep.
So I don't like that. So I like to have control over my software, and I don't want to have to flash my phone or whatever. But
Yeah.
they like to restrict a lot of things, and honestly, a lot of the software on Samsung Galaxy phones, it's a lot of bloatware.
Mm-hmm.
And even as powerful as their hardware is, there's still performance issues. And nowadays, being a millisecond or two, that might not seem big, but if you're the type of person, I bought like a top tier, I should rarely have lag. And I go back to the Apple iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
They optimize their software so well, even on old hardware. So why can't you do it with like so much RAM and so much processing power? So the software, to be honest, I know as stupid as it sounds, the software, mainly Samsung's TouchWiz, is the only reason why I have not gotten a Galaxy phone. So
Yeah. I mean, you bring up a very good point. This is a lot of first world problems, but
Yep.
but deservedly so, because if you're paying top price, you should be getting top performance, top experience.
that's correct.
It is interesting as you said, because my first Samsung phone was a S3, and then I upgraded to the S6, so I skipped like those 2 generations in between. And to be honest, I didn't really have any of those issues. Yes, the bloatware was on there. Yes, you kind of have to root it or flash it or hack it in order to uninstall it. And I did that on my S3, but even on my S6, I haven't had to touch it in that aspect, just because it doesn't bother me enough. As far as
Yep.
performance goes, it hasn't slowed down one bit. It's still running as fast as it was as the day I bought it. The only thing I could really say about it is battery life is deteriorating, and I understand that. That's just a norm to be expected for any phone. But on the other hand, up until my S3 broke, only because I had dropped it on the floor way too many times, and eventually it just stopped turning on. It just became unusable. Up until that point, it was still it still did everything I needed it to do, And at that point, it was already like a 4-year-old phone, which is really interesting because, my girlfriend, she has an S5 Active, and that thing just I don't know how or why it chugs so hard right now for her. I mean, I'm talking like first gen, second gen levels of performance, where sometimes it'll take her like a minute or a minute and a half to text or something like that, something really seemingly easy like that. So, maybe it's not the hardware, because the hardware is way more than capable.
Yeah, the hardware, it's amazing.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe it's the fact that maybe it's an AT&T image issue or something. I don't know. To me, it's like no phone in the past 3-4 years should be tanking that hard. Well,
Yep.
let me take it back. In the past 2 years should be tanking that hard, but for some reason hers is.
Yeah.
And so that's like an anomaly to me. But I haven't had that experience with my Samsung. So, yeah. And I guess to me at this point, I'm not too worried or concerned about what's coming in my phone, because I know it's really gonna, I'm sure everything going forward can do everything I need. I don't need to do anything crazy, but it is always nice to be able to pick the best value out there already. Just ease of mind, right? So
Yeah.
I guess with that being said, what about the OnePlus? I mean, I know that came out a while back, and that was touted as really good hardware for the price as well.
Yeah, I mean, the OnePlus to me, they lack a micro SD card slot. I think they don't have a micro SD card slot on their latest one. And other manufacturers have, I think, surpassed them. Look at Huawei; they came out with some amazing hardware at a great price. And not only Huawei, but there's also Xiaomi. They come out with some amazing hardware at a price. So, and OnePlus, I think they're owned by Huawei. I think, if I remember correctly. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, I think OnePlus has pretty much been surpassed by Huawei and Xiaomi, especially Xiaomi. Xiaomi is really big. So yeah. So I think I'm more excited about the mid-range Android phones because they're doing a lot and they're giving you a lot of quality. I mean, if some of the phones at that price, specifically for Huawei and Xiaomi, they're offering flagship features. Wireless charging, very good build quality, and fingerprint, very fast fingerprint. The Huawei, I think it's the Huawei 6P, if I remember correctly. That one is like $400. It's completely unlocked. They sell at Walmart. I mean, not Walmart. They sell at Best Buy, by the way. I played around with it. Very high quality build materials. It's got a micro SD card slot. I think you could remove the battery, and it was pretty fast. I don't think it had a 2K screen, but $400.
Yeah.
It looked really good to me. 1080p screen.
Yeah. So I did read a funny comment the other day. Bet Samsung were kicking themselves for not having a removable battery in their latest Note.
Yeah. That's
sorry guys, maybe next time.
Maybe next time.
I don't think it'll change your stance on that. But alright, anyways, so we talk about phones a lot. And we're gonna stop talking about phones now because we just talk about it every single week.
But this one makes sense because it's a Pixel phone.
Yeah. Okay. So it might be quiet for a while on the phone front. But if you guys need recommendations or anything, let us know, and we could shoot you some recommendations in your price range. All right, so moving on to the next topic, we're going to be discussing Amazon removing incentivized reviews. And as I had mentioned previously, it's basically a program where a vendor would contact you, send you a free product, and in return, you would give them a honest review. Honest. And the issue with this is that it does skew a lot of these ratings because, I don't know, for the most part, the first thing you see on Amazon, how the search engine is optimized, a lot of the 5 stars pop up first, right? Oh, it's a top seller, it's 5 stars, etc., etc. And it's come to the point where you don't even consider something that's less than 4 stars, really. But basically a lot of these vendors are just paying off the customers for reviews, so it really does skew the quality, or skew the ability to really trust if these reviews are legitimate or not. So how do you think this affects us as the end user? Do you think it's gonna be better? Do you think it's gonna be the same? I
want to tell you this. I do sell on Amazon. I publish books on Amazon, and this is nothing new. Because if you're doing Amazon FBA, you're doing Amazon Kindle, which is what I do, we've always had to deal problems with fake reviews. And as a matter of fact, in the Amazon terms of service, they will terminate your account if you have fake reviews. And so we've had things where you could pay for reviews, which a lot of people still do. You have some, like what you just said, they incentivize them for reviews, and Amazon has been slowly but surely, they've been cracking down on that. And it does skew the buying because most people, like you said, they do look at the reviews first to make their buying decision. And so Amazon's been really cracking down on it, and so but it has been an ongoing problem though.
Cool. So I mean, how would this benefit Amazon?
It benefits Amazon because when people think about Amazon, I go back to the brand and marketing. When you think about Amazon, not only do you think about the fact that you could buy a lot of stuff on there, but you have trust, right? You trust that if you buy something from Amazon, they're going to do their work and due diligence to make sure that the quality is good, to make sure that the vendors are honest, and also to make sure that you get your product, in the form that you thought that you were going to get it, Because if you think about, in general, your brand, your marketing, to me, that's more important than your products and services, okay? So going back to that, let's compare Amazon now to eBay.
Sure.
eBay used to be the place for you to buy and sell, even though it was not, new or whatever for the most part. You can still get new stuff on eBay, but look at the difference between eBay's brand versus Amazon's brand now. I mean, are more people likely to buy from eBay or from Amazon? I think more people are going to buy from Amazon.
I think the general consensus or the connotation for eBay is if you want to buy something used and possibly take a risk, you would look for eBay, but you could possibly get it at a very cheap price. I think when you choose Amazon, you have like that sense of security that mean, it's going to come in 2 days. It's going to be backed by their guarantee. You have any issues with it? So yeah.
So yeah, I really think that they're taking the steps to do that. Now, from somebody who actually sells on Amazon, Amazon constantly changes their policies, just like all these other platforms. Like, for example, if you are familiar with Amazon Publishing, you are familiar with this concept called KENP, and that is pages read. And more than a year ago, before they instituted KENP, you would get paid every time somebody bought your book, even if they didn't read it, okay? And so what Amazon did was they instituted a KENP where you wouldn't get paid unless they actually read your book. So that effectively got rid of all the, well, not all of them, but got rid of a lot of people who were gaming the system and just putting out a lot of books just to sell it. And so, yeah, they're doing a lot of things. And, you know, one thing that you'll realize if you do decide to pursue a career or business on the internet is that every single platform has rules and policies, and you're constantly having to adjust what you do in accordance with it. And so it is very challenging, because but they have to do that too.
There are going to be some people who ruin it for everyone else, and why we can't have nice things, right?
Yeah, there's always going to be that, you know, and so all businesses understand that. And even if you're not in business, that happens, you know, people are going to be people. And so a lot of these things that are being done is to prepare for that and to take care of that. And if you already know, if you're on YouTube or any other platform, they automate as many of these things as they can, because it will be impossible for humans to take care of all this. So I think in the long run, it will be good, but not good for the people selling on it. Okay. It's good for the consumers.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if there's too much to say there, but maybe it's just a nice PSA. So maybe you'll start seeing some changes too, you know, like the more you shop on Amazon. So yeah, just be unaware, or, you know, be on the lookout, and yeah, just see how it affects you and let us know. I'll definitely be keeping a lookout and definitely being conscious as I continue to shop on Amazon.
Yeah, and you do shop on Amazon. I shop on Amazon. I really do think they've taken the right steps. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I guess there's not too much to touch on there. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and move into the next topic. So this one's going to be specifically about VR headsets, and the one we're going to start out with is the PS4 VR headset, which has some early reviews already come out. Yeah, so go ahead and just get us started with that.
Yeah, so as everybody knows, you know, most people are now familiar with the whole concept of VR or virtual reality. And usually when you think about that, you're thinking about the Oculus Rift, HTC Vive, and then to a lesser extent, the Samsung Gear VR, and also Google Cardboard. And now PlayStation, or before it was called the codename Project Morpheus, has finally gave out the units for early reviews. And it's the PlayStation VR, if you didn't know. And so far the reviews have been good, I think. You know, so some of the things that at least I saw, the first thing that I saw was the fact that the graphics, okay, because that's a huge thing. If you're going to be doing VR, fidelity, the graphical fidelity, and the frame rates and so forth, that is extremely important.
Yeah, let's pause there for a second, and I guess I want to chime in. The reason why fidelity is so important is because you need to be as immersive as possible, right? And like what you mentioned about the phones earlier, if you do notice a slight delay or lag, it's going to break that immersion. So you definitely don't want that in VR. Otherwise, you're never going to be fully into it. So, you know, the first thing I would say is probably frame rates, right? The amount of frames, the refresh rate. And I guess the best way to describe that is kind of like how something smooth scrolls across your screen, or how smooth like the animations are. So if you play games like, I don't know, Call of Duty, that game runs at 60 frames per second. And maybe some other games, you notice that it just feels like a little more crisp and smooth. Those are the games that run at higher frames. And with VR, I think these are running closer to like 75 plus frames, maybe 75 to 90, right? So I would definitely say that's the first barrier to entry, that's the first price of entry in VR is high frame rates. I think the second would be resolution. So what are the resolution rates on this PS4 VR? If you know.
I think the resolution rates is actually, I'm pretty sure it's 1080p. And so If you compare that to the HTC Vive,
and that's going to be per eye, right?
Yes,
Yeah, per screen.
on the actual
so there's two
set
screens
itself.
yes.
Yeah. So it's 1080p. So if you're the type of person who does spend a lot of time in front of a screen, you will notice the difference. And you got to remember the screen's really close to you. So even at 1080p, although it looks good, you're still going to see a difference if you're looking at an Oculus Rift or HTC Vive, where it is at a higher resolution. So things are going to be muddier. And I can't really tell that by just looking at YouTube videos.
Yep.
But that's one of the things that they complained about.
Yeah, that's definitely something that you need to be to experience in person. Otherwise, you never be able to tell the difference. But like you said, things being muddier or things being maybe like more pixelated really is like, I guess, the best way to put it. It's not as clear or sharp as as what you're used to. But they have to have that trade-off, because if they're expecting it to run at a very high frame rate, they need to find the appropriate resolution, because high resolution means more processing power. It means your frame rates, your performance will just drop in general if the hardware is not good enough.
And I do want to touch on the technical requirements, because I think that is extremely important in VR.
Yep.
And the main selling point of the PlayStation VR is that most people already have a PlayStation 4. And so
they don't need to shell out.
Yeah, can you tell us
amounts.
about the spec requirements for the HTC Vive and Oculus Rift? What is the typical spec requirements?
Yeah, so typical spec requirements, I mean, obviously you want a pretty capable desktop, and if you're going for the laptop route, it's probably going to cost you probably mid, 1K, 1.5K, I would say, for a laptop capable of that, if not more. But if you're planning to build a desktop or buy a desktop, I would say, maybe $670 desktop can probably run it fairly well. Of course, anything on top of that is just going to be icing on top of the cake to make it that much better. But I would say, desktops within the 670 range are going to be capable. Not including the headset, So when you factor in the cost of a headset, that's another $600, right? Around $600. So you compare the total cost, $1,200 for a good desktop and VR setup, or a good desktop and headset, versus a PS4, which is I think it's retailing at $400, but the PS4 Pro is about to come out, so we'll probably see some price drops in there. How much is the PS4 VR headset cost?
Yeah, so the PSVR headset, just for the head unit alone, is $400. Okay, but you still need the camera, and optionally you might want to have the move sticks as well, and that'll add another $100. So that's already $500. And then if you conclude the price of the PS4, you're looking at about $800, and maybe after taxes, you're looking at $900. So, and you got to remember, the PlayStation 4 VR, the headset itself is new. Okay, but I don't think the other components, they weren't made for VR. So the PlayStation camera was not made for VR. So the depth of field, the view is not as great as the HTC Vive or Oculus Rift. And also, more importantly, the PlayStation Move controllers, they were never intended for VR in the first place, unlike the HTC Vive or Oculus Rift. So you're going to get, to me, you're going to get a much better VR experience through those two. Not to say that PlayStation VR isn't going to give you a good VR experience. It's just that if you factor in all the costs, and you got to remember, although the PlayStation 4 hardware is nice, it's like 5 years old, and it's not going to be able to compete against a PC, which you continually upgrade.
And so, for the most part, consoles, will never be up to real parity with PCs. So. But, I mean, we are making these compromises, right? I mentioned the price earlier. We're talking about $1,600 versus $800. And PS4 is going to be something that most people already own, whereas maybe a capable desktop is not going to be something that the average consumer will have.
That's correct. So I think whenever the PS4 Pro comes out, and obviously Sony and Xbox, Microsoft, they knew this. And so by the time that comes out, which is in another month, you will get better graphical fidelity out of it.
Of course.
So we'll wait to see there. But I still think even with the PS4 Pro, the actual head unit is still limited by the 1080p screens.
Yeah, so but I mean,
I don't know how much of a difference that's going to make.
Yeah, but definitely, we got to start somewhere, right? You got to get your foot in the door somewhere. So even just trying it out now, I say, good for Sony. And I think what's really going to be the legs that make the stand long term is going to be the software support, right? And that's going to be true of any console games.
That's correct.
I mean, at this point, we do have a lot of different options. You have, Xbox One, you have, PC, really. Those are the only two other ones. But the point is that the options are still there, and in order for you to, continue your grasp on the console market, I think you do need very strong software support, which PS4 does have, and that's why I would generally say that the PS4 kind of outpaces the Xbox in that regard, just because there are better games. Better games out for it. And so the same could be true for the PS4 VR as well. HTC Vive and Oculus Rift have been out for quite some time now, but I don't think it caught on. There's a lot of hype surrounding it before it came out, but I don't think it caught on as fast as some people would have liked it to. It's really cool
because of the price. Price.
Yeah, not even only the price, but even the people who can afford it. They're like, yeah, it's cool, but it's not something that there's a lot of good games out for yet, right? So it's nice to have, it's nice and fun to play, but there has been no real killer app for it just yet.
Yep.
And so maybe that's where the difference where Sony can step in, because first and foremost for the PS4 it is all about the games, and they already have a strong support lineup. And the biggest profile game that I could think of off the top of my head for PS4 VR is going to be Resident Evil 7. So,
Resident Evil 7, Star Wars Battlefront, Batman VR. Those are some heavy hitters. And I do want to talk about VR a little further.
Sure.
Okay, let me get something really quick.
Yeah. Oh, I wasn't coming up with... Let's play a guessing game, guys. No, I'm just kidding. In the meantime, I'm going to entertain you with some cool emojis. Let's see. What is Twee?
Okay, so typically when we think about VR, we think about gaming, but I think about VR as in just content, okay? And I just got this right here. So this is a $20 VR headset right there. And I did a video on this just recently, but I'm more thinking of VR content as a whole. If you go to YouTube, there are more VR videos. Netflix VR is available on the Oculus Rift. There's going to be a lot more virtual reality content. And when I tried this with my my phone, and this LG G5, this is one of the reasons that I wanted it. It has a 2K screen, the QHD screen. And I got to tell you, I was extremely, extremely impressed by this. And so the technical is very important. However, I actually had content that I could watch it in. It's just like the whole games thing. If you don't have the correct content, the hardware doesn't matter as much. And this one, I actually got this for $16. It retails for $20. And I was really, really impressed by this. I really felt like I was immersed. Now, some of the drawbacks on it is the same thing that's going to affect anybody who does VR. I got really dizzy and nauseous. And I couldn't watch for more than, I'd say 40 minutes. It took me like a few hours to not get dizzy. But it was awesome when I was watching. Then having it on this 2K screen, everything was so clear. It's pretty amazing, So I really think where we're going to get a lot of games in the near future is with content in general, not just video games. So I think that's going to be a very fun area.
Definitely. I mean, it's still a very infantile stage right now. We're definitely working out the kinks to make it, easier for the long term. Things like spatial recognition, and I mean, I know we didn't touch on this too, but another really important thing about VR is being able to, I guess, register in like the actual physical space that you're in, right? So making sure you have enough room, making sure like you can swing your controllers around and things like that. I think the Vive does it a little better than the Rift, so we'll see how.
Yes. But
I mean,
you do need more space.
Yeah, you do need more space, but that is another factor to consider. But again, these things will probably all be ironed out, within the future. So, for now, and like I said before, it didn't really just catch on because, if any PC gamers, they're always about the latest spec, latest hardware, the, latest thing out, especially, when you're like that enthusiast level. And to me, a lot of people were excited for VR before it came out, but then it didn't really fizzle out. It just kind of, maybe it's becoming a slow burn, It didn't just explode, It wasn't the next greatest thing yet. but you know, like all things, you need to go through a few iterations before we get to that point. So,
Yep.
I mean, I guess overall for maybe the PS4 VR, it's going to be great to entry it. Maybe more importantly for the VR field in general is that it's going to give it the exposure it needs. You know.
Yeah. I definitely think that they are going to be the best-selling VR headsets ever. I think so. Because VR has been around
and
for
it's short.
a long time.
Okay. I mean, you say a long time, but I guess like for this generation of VR, I was gonna say this generation has been very short. You know.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, do you really think it's gonna be the best selling out of the Vive and the Rift?
Yes. I mean, mainly because of what you said earlier. Sony has a brand. They have an ecosystem built. They have a lot of software partners who's going to make a lot of games, and they're Sony. And so I know Oculus Rift is owned by Facebook, but to me that's more like a pet project for them right now. That's not their main core business.
Yeah.
And HTC Vive, even though the hardware is great, it's HTC. They don't have the financial backing of Sony or the support.
Yeah. But I mean, they are taking different approaches at it, right? So maybe Facebook is taking more of the approach to it becoming a norm in the future, so they can, so Facebook can feed you all the content that they want to do your Rift. HTC doing it more from like the hardware standpoint. I think they're more open about pushing more open standards regarding this, right? So they're trying to be a player in that regard. And I think Sony, yeah, they want to make the software for it. So I feel like even though all three exist in a similar space, they all have different intentions, you know.
And let's not forget Google Daydream VR. That would definitely be a player, because this this headset is based upon Google Cardboard, and so you can't rule them out, because whenever the Google Pixel phone is released, I think the Google Daydream VR is going to be $79. So I think if they get the marketing out there, I think a lot of people are going to buy that as well.
Yeah. And so this is more of like I guess more of like a marathon type of race. I mean, I think eventually we're all going to end up in the same place anyways, but this is kind of like a first to market thing. People are going to be tripping, the competitors are going to see where they trip and try to fix it. And I guess it's only like as consumers we're winning, right? Because a lot of companies are taking interest in it, and then it really pushes everyone else to really bring up their competition and to really. And
I also think as content creators, we're winning too, because with this, I've already created some VR content with my 360 camera.
Sure.
So for content creators, they're going to have a new level of creativity. You're going to be able to tell different stories.
Yep.
So I'm excited about where we're heading with VR.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know you were. And you and I were kind of there for the advent of smartphones. Do you really see this taking off in a very similar fashion? Because I know when smartphones first came out, like some people knew about it. Maybe the adoption rate wasn't super high, but like like the geek like you and I are, we're like, oh yeah, like we're really into this. But then all of a sudden it just takes over. But very slowly. I guess like more exponentially than anything, right? Because like once it took off, it really took off. So I guess you foresee like the same kind of patterns and trends for VR?
Yeah, I think so. And the reason why I say that is because it's already heading that way. And then from a phone point of view, the Google Pixel phones, they're the first ones to have the VR sensors in them.
Yes.
And so it will be normal in the future for people to do 360-degree, cameras with their phone. Right now you have to have a separate device for that. And so the Google's Pixel phones, they already have those sensors built in, so you could already do VR videos, okay? And so that is going to be more commonplace. And like I said, as more and more content creators start creating more VR content, like I've already created some, but it's not there yet. It's going to be normal, So I'm excited about it. I'm excited. It's going to be pretty fun,
Yeah. So I feel
more of a content end for me.
Yeah. So I was actually going to say, like as of today, as a content creator, would you recommend, I guess, looking to VR or keeping that in mind for the future?
I think for most people who do stuff specifically on YouTube or just videos in general, they are keeping it in mind, but I think more people are concerned about creating 4K content.
Okay.
Because that's going to become more relevant sooner than the VR stuff.
Sure, sure.
Because more people are buying 4K TVs, and then 6K is going to come out soon.
Okay.
So
As a gamer, because again, the VR it spreads a very wide demographic. So as a gamer, I would say, let's see what Sony has in terms of what hits they can bring out, hopefully, and then we'll really see how, I guess, the gaming community just if it accepts VR, very quickly, or if it's going to be more of a slow burn.
I'm like curious, like, when I'm trying to VR headsets, it makes sense to me more as a content consuming device currently, okay? But then the games that I've seen in VR, most of them are on the rail type shooters, not a lot of interactivity.
Okay, well, think about this, right? When a Wii first came out, maybe you can even make some comparisons between like the types of release software, because when Wii first came out, it was all just pointing around with your nunchuck.
Sure,
right? It was just like point and click, right? Because people were still figuring out like the limitations, what they can do with it, just really figuring out the platform itself. And so maybe it's the same with VR too, right? There's just still just like a lot of it does seem like tech demos.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
But you do need to spend some time with it to grow with the technology and to, I guess, grow your creativity with it, right?
Yeah, I just don't see at this point the applications of long-term gaming. Like I could see like a first-person shooter in VR, but I don't know. I don't know if I could play Doom in VR. You got to stand up and you got to move really quickly, and then your vision and everything else. I don't know. I don't know
so
how it works.
You're looking at it more from like a physical limitation rather than like a, I guess, creative limitation, right?
Yeah. Like how would you do it? I mean, it would be difficult, I would think.
Maybe
at this point with the technology
for your generation.
Think about Doom.
That's good.
No, but if you think about Doom, even the current Doom, how would you play that in a VR space? It's difficult. That's all. It is
definitely gonna be interesting, because I wonder what kind of studies they have done on VR regarding like how it affects the human body, right?
Yep.
Whether like the eye strain or the dizziness
Yep.
and things like that. I mean, like I said, it's still in its infant stage, but I'm sure they must have done enough research for them to really put their foot forward on this, to make sure it will be the next big thing. Because if they ever like foresaw limitations where like our body couldn't handle the VR, then then why invest so much into it, right? If they know eventually it's not going to work out for us physically.
Well, I mean, sometimes you don't know all the variables,
Right,
I mean,
right, true.
But like for VR, just my own physical experience, I got dizzy. And then another thing is, imagine if you're watching like a horror themed game, right? With all the noises and your mind, it can't tell the difference between
literal
reality
heart attack.
and not. Yeah, you're gonna have a heart attack,
Yeah.
or you don't have a good health. You could die in a VR environment.
I mean,
so
one day I think we're gonna look back on this, and a lot of people before, when graphic fidelity really started going up, people were ultra violent video games, right?
Yeah.
We said that a couple of years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and maybe we're saying this now, but maybe it's the same thing. Like in 5-6 years, people are gonna scoff at us and be like, "Oh, what? You guys don't have VR?" Like,
I'm not saying that it's not going to happen. I'm just thinking about how do you deal with things like that, because I know in the future we're going to be something like a holodeck on Star Trek, or something like The Matrix. I always go back to that movie because that makes so much sense to me. So So anyway, I really think VR, it is exciting. I'm thinking more of it from a content in general. But the gaming stuff, the PlayStation VR, I would say I think it's a step in the right direction, but it wasn't anything that like blew my mind.
No, it really is nothing new, but it's still important just in terms of getting out to the masses, making it known, garnering support behind it. So, we'll really start to see when people create content for it. No doubt in my mind that it is going to be a big thing, but for now, don't worry too much about it. Let other people worry about it until it comes around. All right. Anything else you want to touch on regarding VR?
Nope. I'm gonna try more of this headset, but yeah.
And one day we're just gonna be so, I guess, encapsulated in some kind of virtual environment where, it is. I mean, they called it the Morpheus for probably a pretty good reason. It's probably a reference to the Matrix, right? So
yes, and yeah.
Scarily enough, maybe.
Well, you remember the code name for the PS4 Pro was the Neo.
Yep, there you go, Morpheus and Neo.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that'd be definitely interesting. Tech is always interesting, and we'll always be on the forefront of comment, and then you guys can always try to listen to our guesses, whether we're completely right, completely wrong.
Yeah.
You can laugh at us. That's cool. We like to laugh at ourselves too. So, all right. So ending on that note, I guess we can go ahead and talk about web development, web content, modern website design. More on the design and app design in general. So, you've been around for quite some time now. So let's start with the history of when you first started using the internet.
Yeah.
Just as a preface.
It's perfect that we're talking about new technologies, where things are heading, because a lot of people when they're like on a website, most people are not aware of the technology behind it. I mean, there is so many pieces for you to even see your website.
It's a norm. It's a standard now. Really.
Yeah, it's a standard. But if you've never created a website, you've never had your stuff hosted, you've never done any programming, development, design, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And even if you think about how the data is transmitted, how the URL domain names are transformed into a form that you can understand, it's amazing if you think about it. And so with that being said, I'm from the generation where my first web page, it was all done on a text pad. It's all HTML based, which a lot of people are familiar with. So I actually did code it. And then after that, I moved over to more higher languages, whenever Java came out, then JavaScript, mostly with JavaScript. And so you would do simple things like hello world and so forth, right? In that same programming, you would try that on a website. And then when I started, we still had Netscape. Netscape was prior to Mozilla. It was pretty powerful. And obviously there was still Internet Explorer. So at that time, HTML, just websites, web services were really in its infancy.
Well, we consider very basic. I mean, you can even go a step before that, and it wasn't even graphics, right?
It wasn't.
Strictly just text. Just some.
Yeah, it was forums or bulletin boards before that. So it was even before that.
More primitive. Yes.
Yeah, no graphical user interface. But I'm thinking more of like the way that we look at websites now is more graphical.
Yes, of course.
And so after that, after I did the HTML and so forth, then we had tools to create web pages. We had WYSIWYG editors, so that's what you see is what you get. And so at the time, I started learning Adobe products, okay? And then primarily Dreamweaver. I did, and that was when you had you could create a whole website using a tool that did a lot of the programming for you. So you were more focused on, hey, I'll move this block over here, and then the WYSIWYG tool
it's more of a visual editor, like dragging and dropping elements onto your screen.
Yes, and so when I moved on to that, it made it a lot easier to take your ideas and put it in a way that would look very similar, okay? And so you didn't have to think as much about the programming underneath, okay? And so after that, I would do other things like in Adobe Photoshop, the websites back then, you could basically build a whole website, and people still do today, off of just images. Okay, so I would put a whole bunch of images there.
So I would say the technique here is imagine one static image, and then you put kind of for example, annotations in YouTube, right? You this area from here to here is a button, but it's not an actual button like we would think of nowadays. It was like an annotation. And when you click here, it'll do something. But Yeah, continue.
Yeah, and so from there, obviously we got into the whole realm of some really, at that time, advanced WYSIWYG editor, which would be WordPress. WordPress is the largest,
in a sense. So I would say the YC editors, the main problem with those is that they're not flexible. You know, it's very easy to get
Yeah.
something started. It's very easy to create something, but you're gonna end up creating something that looks like everyone else's thing that does everything
Yeah.
else.
You know,
And
let me correct myself. I wouldn't
sure,
say WordPress is really truly
yeah,
a WYSIWYG
I
editor
wouldn't say
because it's
either.
not. A truly WYSIWYG editor is what is the free website? Squarespace.
Yes,
I can't
Squarespace.
remember the other one. It starts with the W. Wix. Wix
Yeah,
is another
Wix.
one.
Yeah, Wix.
Yeah, and so they are more of a truly drag and drop WYSIWYG editor, whereas
Mhm.
WordPress, it's kind of like a combination of the two.
Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
and
yeah, but go ahead. And I
so
would say, you know, the underlying theme is that someone else has already built the functionality
yep,
for you to do that. So the approach is slightly different, but the idea is the same. So in, you know, something like Wix or Squarespace, you are just visually dragging and dropping things.
yep,
WordPress, you can visually drag and drop things too, but it also kind of wants you to work a little more on the dirty side, right? A little more hands-on
yes,
with it. So
yes,
when you talk about ease and accessibility, yes, you know, Squarespace and Wix, it's going to be above WordPress, but WordPress is a very close second in terms of, you know, ease of access to something like that.
yeah, and it is more powerful, you know, for people who want to spend the time. However, you know, we're transitioning, you know, and so I don't. If anybody who's ever created a WordPress website, to me, it's still an amazing tool. It's open source. It's free. However, there's obviously with any software, there's problems with it. You know, there's security problems because it's built up on top of PHP,
It's a
and
lot of
PHP.
things that the end users don't see.
That's correct. Yeah, end users don't see. But if you yourself, if you've ever had a WordPress website, you know plugins are a problem. Security is the main problem, I think. And then a lot of times when you are updating, usually plugins, it'll break something else. And so,
Sometimes it's too complex for its own good. There are a lot of moving
yeah,
parts to it, and
there's a lot.
and in the way that you know, I would say WordPress and a lot of other these PHP frameworks are structured is that, you know, you take one cog out and the whole machine stops.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so from a technical standpoint, because there's not just WordPress, you know, there's Joomla, there's Drupal. Nowadays, I think the majority of people can create a website much easier. They don't have to pay somebody $1,000, but a truly well-designed website from the front end all the way underneath, it requires skill and different technologies. And that's where, you know, I think you're at right now.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say, you know, definitely anyone can get a WordPress account, anyone can get a theme, and that by, you know, if it does what you need it to do, yeah, more power to you. You were able to set up quick. You didn't have any information on how to set up, but you just did it, right? And, you know, I would say, yeah, just levels of how easy it is, you know, Wix and Squarespace, you know, number one, just drag and drop. It does what you need. You can create a blog and stuff like that. You know, WordPress, you can do a little bit more with it. You can add like plugins, search features, probably like shopping features, a lot of different plugins for it. But in order to truly stand out and be modern and to make a very, very well polished, you know, emphasis on polish, you do need to do it yourself. You know, it's just one of those things where you know, anyone could get it running, but in order to polish it, to make it shiny, nice, new, snappy, you do need someone who is experienced, you know, in doing that.
So where is the new web technologies heading? What's the difference between that and WordPress? Let's just use that
Yeah.
example, or any of these other
Sure,
tools.
sure. So the way I see it, a lot of people, even a lot of people I know, are getting much, much more interested in development. You know, back when I started, I was like the only kid in high school really like into it. But now I'm seeing, you know, just the ease of access of game development. It's becoming much, much easier. Easiest it's ever been, I would say. And so, like this modern web, like the one you're talking about, like kind of like the trends and what we're using, what people are using, what we're kind of looking towards. For a developer, it's heaven sent because there's a lot of tools that are very easy to use. Not only easy to use, but already polished for you, and you can spend, you know, less time on development but more time on emphasizing the actual design for it. But that's not to say it's gonna be like a WordPress level. Like you still do need some hardcore development skills, but it's much easier than it ever was before.
So can you like, I mean, because you're talking in very general terms, so
Yeah,
can you
yeah.
give us a specific on if you were to build a modern
Sure.
website now using a new one, what are the tools? How do you set it up? I mean, like it's
Yeah,
different.
yeah. So definitely, with so many different types of applications on the internet, you first need to figure out what what you want your website to do. Do you want it to be a blog? Do you want it to be like a short informational website? Do you want it to be an actual web application that can, connect to a database or like provide some kind of service for someone and actually do some processing? The first place I would look for is choosing the right tools for the right kind of website that you want to create. And in general, a lot of these, like the front end, like the actual graphical visual part, is called the front end, and they have a lot of front end frameworks. And what a framework is basically kind of like, think of it as a structure, right? So in modern web dev, they try to standardize a lot of things. So if you look at the progression of the internet as a whole, like with each I guess major era, decade, or whatever you want to call it, it always gets more and more standardized, So from what you said was like just basic HTML, just basic pictures, to WordPress, where it kind of becomes like more modularized. Like for example, WordPress, maybe search bars started becoming a norm, maybe posts, tags, hashtags start becoming a norm, right? So as we kind of develop with these trends, we need, to pick the right tool to do those. And so these tools, what they provide is they provide those standards. A framework basically gives you a scaffolding of a website. So it'll give you very common things used in every website. Search bars, scrolling, I'm sorry, sliders, I'm sorry. I'm choking up right now. I'm a web developer, I actually do know this. But they give you like, sidebar menus, just like a lot of common design elements that you see in tons of websites. Okay, so like headers, search bars, footers, video players to an extent, menus, navigation bars, navigation links, everything like that, right? So you don't need to reinvent the wheel necessarily. You use this framework that someone has already built, it's already proven, and it's already useful, basically. So you're cutting out a lot of the fat in development. It's very, very, I would say, lean, because you have the tools in front of you, and then they're all purposeful, and so when you use these frameworks, you really do focus more on what you want your website to do.
Yeah, so how is that different from like right now, like WordPress? You have this tool
Yep.
that you can use to do everything, right? So how is this different from this new web dev environment? Do you have to learn how to a certain programming language, or is there a web management tool like WordPress?
Yeah, so I would say before WordPress became very user friendly, I would say even like the hardcore tech guys use it first, right? But they made it in such a way where it's very accessible to other people. In terms of this new web development, it's not as accessible yet, just because it's not like a lot of hand-holding, automated setups, automated guides. You still do have to program. So I guess the main difference in this is that, yes, you do need to have some programming experience to use it. But the difference is that it's much quicker than it ever was before.
So what are some programming languages? Like, how would you do it? Would you program everything in a text editor and then upload it? I mean, like, that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, sure. So, and maybe if I put it this way, when we use WordPress, it's mostly in the admin panel, right? Like you go to your website and then you manage it from some admin panel. With this modern web dev, it's not like that. You may think it's going backwards because we're going back to editing in a text pad or whatever, but you need that in order to be flexible. In order to make your website this polished, you do have to kind of get back down to the basics. So while it's harder to write, while it's harder to make or program, develop, whatever, it still is like incredibly flexible and powerful and robust, I would say. So yeah, you're not editing it in the admin panel. You're actually writing HTML code. You're actually writing JavaScript code. Yeah, and those are going to be like the two heavy hitters, and obviously CSS for styling. But I would say the difference and maybe the way it kind of came back to this, kind of going from like a PHP oriented to JavaScript HTML oriented, is because our modern web browsers are extremely powerful now. So before, the whole point of WordPress is that there's a back end server doing your processing for you. Whether it's like kind of querying the database or doing some kind of complex calculation in order to serve you your data, you couldn't do it in your web browsers. Most computers weren't fast enough to do it at that time. But since our hardware has advanced to such a place like it is today, our browsers are extremely powerful. You can consider them thin clients. You can do crazy amounts of calculation. You should take any like any kind of interaction you had with 3D modeling in your web browser, right there. Like you can run 3D games in your web browsers, etc., like Unity or whatever. The difference is that you don't need a back-end server anymore. You can do everything in your browser, and it kind of goes back to the roots of HTML and JavaScript. But now that we have access to these more powerful browsers, we can do a lot more with it.
Yeah. So I mean, before, like that's a good example. Like a video game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before, there's no way you could have the browser process this on the fly.
Exactly.
That's what JavaScript does. It does it on the fly. Mm-hmm. So a lot of programs that you produce, you create the program somewhere else. There's no processing involved because you created executable, which then you run. So there's not as much processing. So a lot of the work has already been done. Where now, because like you said, the technologies, the hardwares, the browsers, everything's just so much more powerful. You could do a lot of that on the fly, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So I guess let me put it in this way. A lot of applications still do need a backend. Do not get me wrong. There's always going to be a need for a backend. You're trying to calculate 100,000 users at the same time. You need a backend. But
sure.
As far as the actual visuals go, your browser has a very, very, very powerful way of rendering the actual visuals on screen, and even doing some, pretty. I mean, you can still even do intensive calculations in your browser. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that, as far as like visuals and aesthetics go, your browser is always going to be the one to do that now. And then for any like complex calculations, you do still have your backend. But before, it was kind of your backend did both of that, and it just kind of served you a page or something. But now, in the modern web, a lot of it has shifted back to the front end.
Yeah, and I think by doing it this way, I noticed like my brother, he just created a mock-up using these new technologies. And then one thing I noticed was, since your backend doesn't have to do the calculation processing plus render the actual graphics, to send the information there, the website are much faster. I mean, at least on the front end.
Okay, so that's a bit twofold. A lot of these websites, they still do run on older technologies, right? For example, like you said, WordPress. A lot of sites on the internet still run on a lot of different types of languages and frameworks, right? So, you may not notice. An average person would not be able to tell the difference of what kind of technology a certain website is running, which is good in a sense, right? But then there are some frameworks that kind of exceed your expectations, like what you're saying, right? Like, whoa, this is like really snappy. Whoa, this like the animation's really fast. Again, those aren't as prevalent, but eventually they're going to start to become more prevalent.
And so if somebody is, just for our audience, if somebody is interested in doing the new web development, what are some tools or programming language that you think would be helpful for them to learn?
Yeah. I guess before going back, I wanted to mention that, with these WordPress, with these older technologies, as we mentioned before, it is like a very possibly fragile machine, right, with tons of cogs in it. Now that we're going back more to the roots of HTML, it's become a lot simpler, right? We're not dependent on like database connections. We're not dependent on these overly complex process. One of like the mantras of modern web development is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah. So I feel that's one of the most powerful parts of this modern web development, that you go into it keeping it as simple as you can, because that's gonna, you know, pay off huge dividends in the end. As far as like anyone trying to get into this modern web development, um, I would say, you know, first just start looking at some websites and kind of like looking at the design of it. You know, if you could start to get a better sense of like what makes this website good, I think that's definitely the first step. Like, or how something is designed in such a certain way. Like, you take a look at your mobile apps, right? Like, you know, take your favorite mobile app and start to look at design elements of like where your eyes are kind of like glued to the screen, or like what pops out the most, right? So once you start to kind of figure out why someone has made a website in this way, I think you'll be really poised to start the actual web development, because you know exactly where to start out, and I guess where to begin your imitation, right? Because I mean, I think that's the best way everyone learns, is by first kind of imitating something. And for the tech and the tools, like I said, you do need to have some kind of development experience. So don't expect to do it overnight. Don't expect it to be like WordPress, where you can have it up and running in, you know, in a day, an afternoon, right? You still need to spend time with it to learn. And it's just one of those things that you can't pick up overnight. I mean, maybe over the course of a month or two, you'll be at the point where you feel pretty comfortable with it if you have previous development experience. But again, this is still, you know, pretty geared towards developer, but I would say like the barrier of entry is much easier. So as far as like the tools and technologies, just take a look at some popular frameworks: Angular.js, React.js, Ionic, which is kind of a mobile implementation of Angular.js, Bootstrap even. So these things all kind of serve different purposes, but they're all very similar in the sense that once you start working with it, it's very easy to transition to other types of frameworks, or to other, you know, languages even in this modern web development. So I guess it's really about just practicing, yeah, just spending the actual time to do it. But yeah, you just gotta spend some time working with it.
Yeah, and I think from a person who, if you are a person who does, you know, web development, or you are interested in doing that, I think because it's going back, maybe as a business or as career, you're gonna benefit from this, you know, because in modern web dev, by what you're telling me, not everybody can do it. They have to spend time.
Yeah.
And so until they build tools that could do it automatically, much like WordPress, you know, I think it'd be very lucrative if you have those skills as well.
It is very interesting to see it kind of go back and forth, right? Well, first we kind of like started from the roots, then we went to WordPress, but then we kind of realized, oh, if we go back, it's actually, we can make it a lot more efficient. I guess kind of like starting anew, right? I mean, you know, things like WordPress, they have their advantages. You know, anyone, like literally anyone can get a website up and running. But at the cost of, you know, some things, right? So I'm not sure if it'll go back into that. I'm sure there's going to be some people who offer a service like that, but I'm not sure if it's going to become the de facto service. You know, if you are interested in this kind of thing, you can use that as to, I guess, to pique your interest. But then, you know, if you really, really want to dive into the field, then start learning it from the roots and go up from there.
Yep. And I think if you learn it from the roots, like, you know, I don't do the coding anymore, but if you do learn the roots, the programming, the foundation, the frameworks, the different, if you do programming, you understand classes and objects and, you know, all that other stuff, you have a lot better understanding of how things might work, even in the modern age, because the foundations of it is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's true for any type of programming. You know, once you understand how programming in general works, you can apply to very many different places. It doesn't have to be the web.
And since there's so many, like, there's even more, I think, more opportunities in technologies now, because there's so many different areas. And so, like, for example, if you know how to do web development, well, a lot of it is applicable to mobile development as well.
Exactly.
So you can apply it in more areas than just one.
Yeah. So. And it's not nearly as daunting as it was before. And I mean, I say you still need to be a developer and you still need to understand programming. But, you know, maybe in the past where it took you like a college degree and maybe 2 years of experience, they now have coding boot camps, which you can basically go to class for 2-3 months straight, and then you'll even like no previous programming experience, and you come out be able to develop these modern websites. Yeah, I think those are a really popular thing over here, at least in California Bay Area, and starting to come everywhere else. So is not as daunting before. You still do need to have some coding experience, but it's very, very easy to get into if you commit yourself to doing it, and that's the biggest key, is committing yourself to doing it.
Yeah, so I'm excited, much like I am with VR, maybe even more so because the web's everywhere. I think there's way more opportunity, work, and more advanced things that we could do there than in VR. Because if you talk about the Unity engine, right? Well, they're running 3D games on Unity. So, and even right now, when you're watching YouTube VR videos, there's a web development component underneath that in order for you to experience VR through that. So I think that's more exciting to me. I think you could definitely just YouTube as an example. I'm already watching VR content. So I really feel the web browser, and we talked about this before, that all these technologies know that is going to be our single point of everything in the future, and so it'll be exciting.
Yeah, and it seems like you're really excited just for more of like the potential for just like a multitude of applications. It's not like singular use for it. It's the fact that, man, we can solve a lot of our problems going forward.
A lot, yeah.
And then it comes to the point where you yourself can just make a solution. You have an issue, just go out there and make it.
Yep. Maybe in the future we could do a whole episode on web browsers, the technology behind the history, because I just don't think people realize, and Google knows this. I mean, so do many other companies. So I always thought the idea of a Chromebook was dumb initially, but they were thinking about it from that point of view. The browser is our window to everything. And so I'm really, I keep using that same word. I'm excited because there's so many avenues that you could go towards.
Yeah, and a lot of it is like, you're excited for a lot of stuff now, but that's just like the tip of the iceberg.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
And the more people who get into it, the more stuff we have coming out. The more innovation. Pushing people, further and further. So.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent. I mean, especially now since we are creating content, I'm a big proponent of being creative. And I think with all these new technologies, it allows more people to be creative.
Yep. And that's definitely something the world could use.
Yes.
Like I said, there's no downside to it, but it's always welcomed, at least in our book.
Okay.
Yeah, so I know that was a pretty long discussion on web dev, and maybe you guys, I don't know if you're able to follow me throughout the whole way. I know I didn't explain some of the things the best, so sorry about that. But, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to address them in our next episode. And maybe even going forward, we can start, I guess we don't have to talk about the actual development, but we can talk about trends in web development and what's going to be interesting coming up, we could give a developer's perspective on it, but we don't have to break it down into like the minute details.
Unless you want to know, then you can.
Unless you want to know, then let us know. If you enjoy our, conversations more from like a developer or content creator standpoint, let us know.
Yeah.
But we'll try to have a good mix of content between what's hot and I guess what we find interesting and stuff coming up on the horizon for us.
Yeah.
So we hope that you grow with us, as we move forward. I mean, if you can't tell, we're already excited for stuff we're doing, and we'd be more than overjoyed for you guys to be in that same situation. So come learn and grow with us. Come interact with us. Let us know, what you want to hear about. I guess what we can do better, what you want to talk about, future names,
Yes, Jimmy Lee.
Billy Lee, just anything. Let us know in the comments below. And until next time, we'll see you later.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. See ya.